I'm Alan Colmes. I want to welcome Nihat Awad. He's Executive Director of the Council of American Islamic Relations, also known as CAIR. And Nihat, you have written or participated in a letter to the head of ISIS, as I understand it, explaining point by point, in fact, refuting point by point, their so-called explanation of Islam and their use of your religion for the worst possible means. Tell us about what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Alan, for having me.
Yes, sir.
We've written this letter, and I had the honor to coordinate the formal launch of this letter in Washington, D.C. The letter is basically a draft by over 100 religious scholars from around the Muslim world, grand muftis, leaders of their communities that are well respected and well known in their countries. Basically, the letter is about 28 pages, tackling 24 points.
In Arabic.
In Arabic, but also there is a very accurate translation in English, and now I think the German version of the letter has been released. So the 24 points tackling all the issues that ISIS has used to convince recruiting members of their gang from different countries, especially the neighboring countries. And they have used, of course, religious text to convince people around them that they have legitimacy in conducting war the way they are doing it, by killing innocent people, harming minorities. And basically we say in the letter that he, the leader of ISIS, al-Baghdadi, and his soldiers are violating every spirit, every rule in the Islamic religion, whether in the Quran, the Muslim revealed text, or the tradition of the Prophet.
As I understand it, you quote classic religious texts that have been misinterpreted. What, for example, are some of the things in the Quran that you mentioned that have been misinterpreted by people?
Well, the most important one, and I'm just going to give you just a quick order. No one is eligible to give fatwa or religious ruling or verdict except if she or he is highly educated and qualified in the sciences of Islam, the Arabic language, the Quran, the Hadith, which is the prophetic tradition, to be aware of the entire text in the Quran and the reason and circumstances in which the verses were revealed, and you cannot obtain or derive any ruling unless you know all the matters related to it. So you have to be intelligent, you have to be smart, you have to be capable of, it's like being a judge in the United States. You have to have a degree, and you have to pass certain tests. The most important thing after that, of course, the sanctity of human life. The taking of an innocent life in the Quran, nowhere else you can see that, is equivalent to the taking of the entire mankind. And the saving of one human life is equivalent to the saving of entire mankind. So ISIS and its soldiers have been killing people left and right without any due process, without any respect. And of course, killing emissaries or ambassadors, and hence killing
and beheading, right?
Journalists and aid workers. It is strictly prohibited in Islam.
Right.
And there is no justification, and there is no exceptional so-called circumstances to it.
The other thing you point out in this letter, which I think is extremely important, is that a caliphate has not been established and cannot be established unless there's complete agreement from the entire Muslim community.
Exactly. And so to have like few thousand people appointing themselves as ruler of the Muslim world over 100.5 billion people is nothing short than circular logic and just, tyranny. It's like, imagine if you have a president in the United States in the White House just there without election, just imposing himself or herself on 300 million people. So imagine if you have few thousand people doing the same thing over 1.5 billion people. So it's completely illogical and illegitimate.
What did you mean when you said this letter is not meant for a liberal audience?
Well, because, the ISIS followers, and they are, I know one is too many, but the fact that they have few thousand soldiers with them, they have heavily used religious conservative text. And the scholars who drafted this letter also heavily used the religious classical leaders that ISIS people have cited from a few hundred years ago. And the scholars who addressed ISIS, they wanted to disinfect and dismantle their argument using the same original text and showing that these people are not only misinterpreting, they are abusing and misusing the religion. Because if you argued from a liberal point of view, they will say, well, we are different. It's like Democrats trying to convince Republicans.
Yeah.
Well, it's more effective to have a Democrat speaking to a Democrat.
Right. So in other words, you're speaking from a conservative Muslim perspective, not a more moderate Muslim perspective, perhaps.
Definitely. And of course, the language cuts across the board. Any average Muslim with an iota of logic and thinking, when reading this letter, they know that this is a very serious explanation of the falsity of the claims that ISIS has been using. So our aim is, if anyone who is contemplating joining ISIS, or those who are already there, if they have a chance to read this letter, I assure you, they will think not only twice, 10 times from moving forward with any plan to join.
When this letter was sent out already?
Oh yeah, it was released about a week ago.
And no response, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, I mean, we don't expect a response. We hope that the response will be a practical one by dissuading many people from even contemplating joining ISIS, and definitely for the leader of ISIS to repent and realize that he is committing heinous crimes against humanity and against Muslims and people of other faiths as well.
I get lots of calls on this show from people taking things out of context in the Quran, talking about how violent the language is. I've invited them, those people who are Muslim bashers, to call in while you're on. But what often happens is people wait till the guest is gone, then call and yell at me. But, people will take out of context, extract from the Quran parts that they say, well, look what it says about killing people. Look what it says about going after your enemy. And, the Bible itself, the Christian Bible has many, certainly the Old Testament has many violent passages as well. But there are passages in the Quran, are there not, that show violence?
Well, if your question is Islam a pacifist religion, the answer is not. Islam is a religion, comprehensive way of life, and self-defense is legitimate within Islam. But there is a clear prohibition of any act of aggression against individuals, against the state, against community, even against nature. You have the right to defend yourself, like here in the United States and anywhere, but it has to be under authority. You cannot be vigilante unless you are trying to save your life by just defending yourself. That is the only way. But to take any act of aggression is clearly prohibited, and you can read it from the Quran cover to cover. There is no one even instance or an exception that you can take an act of aggression just to legitimize your act of violence.
What do you expect to happen with ISIS long term? What will become of that group?
Well, we have to put things in proper context. I know that many people were surprised that there is such thing, as ISIS. It has been born out of certain circumstances in the Middle East, because definitely of the lack of leadership on the side of the international community from doing their job to establish, peace and tranquility in the region, because Western powers have definitely been involved there. So the region has not recovered from the old times of colonization and also long wars. For the past 15 years or so, the region has been racked with wars. Most people who are educated, lawyers, professors, doctors, have left those countries, and what you're left with is people who are trying to fill a vacuum using legitimate grievances, but they are misguided because they have been using violence in a very illegitimate way. So I don't think we just have to blame this group or the other. We all should take responsibility in looking at the at the situation there in a comprehensive manner. Bashar al-Assad killed about 200,000 people for the past 3 years. So that gave almost credence and room for ISIS to grow and mushroom and recruit people to do what they believe is the right to do.
I've got to take a break here, Nihad, but thank you very much for coming on and explaining all this to us. Nihad Awad of the Council of American Islamic Relations. Thank you, sir, for your time tonight. Appreciate it very much.